I want to take a moment to honor the memory of Yaron Lischinsky and Sarah Milgrim. Yaron was a brilliant diplomat. He was a practicing Christian, devoted to the Jewish people and the Jewish state. He believed in dialogue and negotiation as tools to achieve a more peaceful world. Sarah Milgrim grew up in a Reform synagogue in Kansas City. She was faithful to the values we strive to instill in every young Jew: commitment to human dignity, peace, coexistence, and a fierce loyalty to the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Both Yaron and Sarah were staffers at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. They were in love. Yaron had already bought the ring. It was the springtime of their lives, when all is fresh, all is green, and everything seems possible. They died together last week outside the Capitol Jewish Museum. Yaron died instantly. Sarah survived the initial shots and tried to crawl away. The murderer mercilessly pumped more bullets into her as her soul slipped the bonds of earthly life. In death, Yaron returned to the Promised Land and was laid to rest in its soil he so loved. Sarah was brought home, interred in the neighborhood of her youth, 6,000 miles from Yaron. May their memories be a blessing, and may young people especially be inspired by their commitment to the Jewish people, the Jewish state, and their dreams for a more peaceful and better world. Since the murders 9 days ago, 2 questions have especially agitated me. First, what kind of depravity, what philosophy, what worldview motivates a young person to leave his home, travel 700 miles to another city, and murder strangers of his own generation in cold blood? And second, does it say anything that these murders unfolded within walking distance of the headquarters of the most powerful security apparatuses the world has ever known? Regarding the first question, we know the motivation of the murderer. Free, free Palestine, he shouted. Free, free Palestine inspired him, and multitudes of others in the East and the West, to kill Jews. He thought Yaron too was Jewish. They were in a Jewish museum, at a Jewish event, organized by the American Jewish Committee, for staffers and employees of the embassy of the Jewish state. Had the murderer known that Yaron was Christian, I doubt that it would have made a difference, because the depth of the hatred of the supporters of the Free, Free Palestine cause condemns all those who support Israel to the same fate as Israelis. Now, I want to be very clear and to emphasize again what I have preached my entire career. Criticism of Israel, its policies, its government, Israeli society itself is entirely legitimate, and not only that, it is often desirable and even necessary. It is not ipso facto evidence of anti-Semitism. We do it ourselves all the time. And concern for the well-being of the Palestinian people is a poignant reflection of Jewish values. Irrespective of your opinion of this war, even if you justify every last measure Israel has taken, still, Jews do not rejoice in the killing of even armed combatants, let alone innocent bystanders. We mourn every loss of innocent life. Each one is a tragedy. And we have an obligation to do what we can to minimize this loss of life. And the fact that we care more about innocent Gazans than Hamas itself does not diminish our moral obligations. That Hamas executes Palestinians who receive food from Israel, preferring that they starve rather than receive Israeli assistance. And the fact that unlike practically every other armed conflict, Palestinian refugees have nowhere to flee because Egypt closed its borders with Gaza. And no country in the world is prepared to accept these refugees, including all 22 Arab countries. These do not mitigate the need to figure out optimal ways to get supplies into Gaza while defeating Hamas. None of this, however, detracts from the undeniable reality that the free Palestine cause is not about peace, it is not about coexistence, or even a Palestinian state. You should be able to hold two ideas in your head at the same time. You should be able to object to the war, if that's your view, and still decry anti-Semitism masquerading as anti-Zionism. Free Palestine is not actually about creating a free Palestine living side by side with a free Israel. Free Palestine is about October 7th. It's about murdering Israelis, Israeli diplomats, and Israel's supporters. It's about harassing Jewish students. It's about delegitimizing Judaism. It is a bullying, intolerant, anti-Western, supremacist ideology. Free Palestine means destruction of Israel. They're not subtle about it. And they don't deny it. Globalize the Intifada is about murdering Israeli diplomats worldwide and attacking Jews and Jewish institutions. The Intifada was a years-long orgy of murder on the streets of Israel, in buses, hospitals, schools, restaurants. They want total destruction of Israel and invest hugely to ostracize Israel's supporters. It's why you can almost never find in the free Palestine movement anyone who actually believes in coexistence. And it is anti-Semitic by its nature and at its core. Are there good people, students, well-intentioned activists who do not subscribe to these hate-filled ideas, who may not even consider themselves anti-Israel, let alone anti-Jewish? Of course. There are even Jews who are part of this movement. But like others before them, they misunderstand the history and the nature of anti-Semitism. You think that just because you live now, history starts with you? That 2,000 years of Jew hatred can be ignored? Or that somehow anti-Semitism today is a radical departure from the anti-Semitism that was transmitted from generation to generation over thousands of years? What hubris You're alive today, so you think that everything starts with you? You have all the answers because you saw it on TikTok? You think that it's all about Zionism? About the West Bank? About Bibi? That explains everything? That explains the Palestinian rejection of the 1947 United Nations partition plan 2 years before Bibi was born? And they've rejected every peace proposal since? Zionism explains the Holocaust? Centuries of persecution of Jews is because of the Jewish state that wouldn't be born for half a millennium? Oppression of Jews in Muslim lands began in the 20th century? You think that the blood libel that Israelis kill and starve children just materialized on October 7th? And has no connection whatsoever to the medieval blood libels of Jews poisoning the wells or killing Gentile children to suck their blood and make matzah? All the while, it's Hamas that targets children. They strangled 4-year-old Ariel and 1-year-old Kfir with their own hands in cold blood. And it's Hamas that is purposely starving Israeli hostages. People they simply stole out of their bedrooms. We have to understand the basic truth. The nature of Judaism is a critique of everyday norms. It's why we're still so small. 0.01% of the human population. We do not conform to the fads of the times. That's the Jewish mission. Am levadad yishkon. The Torah states, a nation that dwells apart, often alone. And this drives those who need conformity to assert power crazy. That's what bothers them about us. So the mere existence of Jews was a centuries-old challenge for Christianity. The mere existence of Jews was a centuries-old challenge for Islam. The mere existence of Jews was a substantial hindrance for communists. The mere existence of Jews challenged the racial ideologies of Nazis. Judaism is for tolerance, reason, debate, pluralism, science, evidence, logic, knowledge, and is thus an obstacle to those who are intolerant, unreasonable, anti-science, and undemocratic. Jews who discovered and disseminated the idea that all human beings were created in the image of God. That came from us. And are thus entitled to equal status and equal dignity in the sight of God. That came from Judaism. Now are an impediment to tyrants and those who seek domination. Those who see themselves as ruling by divine right. And thus Jews, the victims of 20th century genocide, for whom the term was invented, are now accused of committing genocide. And who are the accusers? Terror groups who really are genocidal, and their Western supporters. They don't even hide it. They proclaim it openly. First Israel, then the West. First the little Satan, then the big Satan. What does the repeated threat to destroy the place where half of the world's Jews live say about your attitudes towards the Jewish people? Go ahead and argue day and night that Israel has and is misusing power. You might be right in an instant or two or many. You could possibly show, conceivably show, probably show disproportionate force on this or that occasion. Although, maintain a bit of intellectual modesty. A person living a mile away from Hamas has a different sense of proportionality than a university student passing a resolution on a quad, or occupying a library, or even an opinion writer in the New York Times. But the use of force, proportional or not, justifiable or not, is not the main reason for Jew hatred. It is exactly the opposite. Powerlessness is the most catastrophic condition for the Jews. It's why 20th century Zionism was born in the first place. Jewish history has proven conclusively that it is far better for Jews to have power and agonize over its use than to be powerless and at the mercy of the dark lords. Jewish vulnerability is the impetus for Jew hatred. It's why even before the sun set on October 7th, Israel was accused of genocide and disproportionate use of force, while it was still fighting off hundreds of terrorists within its own borders, its own towns, villages, kibbutzim. It's why for days to come, Israel's enemies were afflicted with a kind of crazed ecstasy. We saw it here. For that one brief moment in time, it looked to them that Israel really could collapse. It really could be overrun. And that placed garden variety hatred of Israel on steroids and brought simmering hostility of Jews to a bubbling brew of bilious bile. The telephone recording of one of the terrorists on October 7th, deliriously informing his parents of his actions on kibbutz Mefalsim, symbolizes the hatred. You can find it online if you care to listen. Your son killed Jews, Dad. Dad, I'm speaking to you from a Jew's phone. I killed her and her husband. Open your WhatsApp and look at how many Jews I killed with my own hands. I killed 10 Jews with my own hands, Dad, with my own hands. His father is heard crying with joy. May God protect you, my son. While his mother tells him, I wish I was there with you. Note that they rejoiced in the killing of Jews, not Israelis. Regarding the second question, how could the murders of Yaron and Sarah have occurred in proximity to the most powerful security apparatus in the history of the world? I have some bad news for us. I think it reveals how much ground we have lost in the past 2 decades. Hatred of Israel and Jews has been normalized much more than we realized or care to admit. We've been sleeping at the wheel. When hate becomes pervasive in society, when it flows in the veins of our culture, even the most powerful security apparatus cannot thwart it all. It's everywhere. We can and should harden security around Jewish institutions. But to make significant progress, we must attack the problem at its source. It lies in the blood libels about Jews that we must discredit. Demonization of Israelis leads to the murder of Israelis. Demonization of Jews leads to the murder of Jews. Look at what we've lost. Jewish authors tell us that their books are harder to publish and promote. Israeli and Jewish-themed restaurants are constantly harassed. There are entire departments in the most elite American institutions of higher learning who teach as fact that Israel is evil and the root cause of the world's injustices. We have allowed that. We have allowed the normalization of anti-Semitism, camouflaged as anti-Zionism, at the highest levels of academia. It's now normal for social justice activists to characterize Israel as the gravest threat to world peace and human rights, and thus to struggle against it is to wage war on injustice. That's what they've convinced themselves. The struggle against Zionism is the struggle to cleanse the world. Our Reform Seminary, Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, on the campus of NYU, one of the jewels in the crown of American higher education, was vandalized this week with graffiti. To kill Israel's supporters is a form of justice. We've lost a lot of ground. But it's not too late. October 7th also awakened us from our slumbers. We can make a difference in all of these areas of American life if we understand the challenges and mobilize for action. Before us are years of reassessment, re-examination, and realignment. In these troubled times, think twice about supporting political, academic, or environmental causes simply because you supported them in the past. Inquire about their views on Jews and Israel, and support only those who support us. But most important of all, we need to recommit to Jewish life. Jewish institutions need your support now, and you need Jewish institutions more now than well-endowed universities. If we raise generations that are knowledgeable about and literate in Judaism, if we raise generations of proud Jews, we'll be fine. These are the best vaccines to contend with the virus of anti-Semitism. And the next generation will be inoculated for life. Shavuot begins on Sunday evening. It's the least known major festival in Jewish America, but in some ways it's also the most important. Shavuot commemorates the granting of the Torah, the sealing of the covenant between God and the Jewish people, and the discipline of Jewish responsibility. On the second night of Passover, we begin counting down the days to Shavuot, as we will do later in this service. By virtue of the command to count down the days, tradition effectively ties Passover and Shavuot into one festival. Passover loses its relevance without Shavuot. Shavuot has little meaning without Passover. That's why we count down the days. Since most American Jews know a lot about Passover, but only a little about Shavuot. Since most of us observe Passover in some way, while few even know when Shavuot arrives, let alone what it's about. The American Jewish community never grasps the full meaning of either festival. Passover reflects and embodies the idea of liberation. The exodus from Egypt, the breaking of the chains of slavery. Shavuot reflects and embodies the idea of responsibility. Without the covenant of the Jewish people, the willing assumption of personal and collective responsibility for fellow Jews and Jewish well-being, there can be no individual Jewish liberty. Shavuot grounds the idea of freedom that is at the heart of Passover. That's why we count down the days. The festivals are inseparable. Passover is breaking the chains. Shavuot is wearing the chains of responsibility. Passover is the promise of freedom. Shavuot is the hard work of freedom. Recommit to Torah, to Jewish values, Jewish literacy, and Jewish institutions for yourself and for your children. Teach them of their responsibility to fellow Jews. Chanech lenar al pi darko, states the Proverbs. Teach a child the right way, and even when he grows old, he shall not depart from the path. Live Jewishly, live proudly. Let us glean strength from each other. And even during these tense and anxious times, remember the profound statement, the prayer, really, of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and live by it. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar meod, v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. The entire world is a narrow bridge, and the essence of life is not to be afraid.